temporarily admitted to Holland. And after arrival, they have immediately to report to the local police for whether they could stay or not. So that was our return to our former home.
We're going to stop now and change the tape. Interviewing Ilse Hess. When we finished the last tape, you had just entered Amsterdam. How long did you stay in Amsterdam?
We stayed in Amsterdam from the middle of July 1945 until 3 days before Christmas 1946.
Can you tell me about your husband's involvement in a war crimes trial?
Shortly after arrival in Amsterdam, my husband got an invitation from the British military to participate as a witness in a trial against this Capo Casimir I mentioned before. Casimir, after Bergen-Belsen was closed, came to Amsterdam to visit his girlfriend and was caught. And the British imprisoned him, and the Jews who were with us in Tröbitz knew what he did and how he behaved. And they told the British, they let the British know, and the British wanted to have a trial. So they invited my husband and a few other people, including 2 or 3 doctors, to talk about Casimir. And everyone agreed that he was a brutal killer and torturer, and that he should be killed himself. Only one doctor wanted to save him. He said that he was very nice to him, but it didn't help. They put him on the gallows a few weeks later, and my husband got the report of the whole trial, which I don't want to tell you now, just to let him know and to thank him that he came.
Can you tell me about applying to come to this country when you were in Holland?
Well, the first thing we did is to decide what we wanted to do. Now, we went already through the concentration camp, through the Hitler time, to everything. But the only thing, we did not want to have our children educated in Europe. We figured they have to get into a completely different surroundings, and didn't know how much effect there was and impact of the Nazis to Holland, and we just wanted out. So after a few days after our return, we applied in Rotterdam at the American consulate for our affidavit, which read that you have to get affidavits from relatives or friends in America that you never will be jobless and never will take any money from welfare or from any state you would move to. Now, we got all this. I had an aunt here who was pretty well off and was willing to do it, and we ourselves had some money, which we had our friends took with them when they moved to Baltimore. Although our money was blocked by the American government, as the money of non-resident aliens, but you could get it free after a certain time. So nothing was really a problem, and we got our permit, and the problem was really only how to get to America. There was only one ship going at that time from England, the Queen Elizabeth, not the new one, the old one. So the only passage we could get was a day or 2 days after Christmas 1945. So we took this, and we had our visa for America for quite some time, because if you don't use it within a certain time, you have to renew the whole thing. You have to start all over again. So we only had one more visit to the consul, American consul in Rotterdam, was a Mr. Justin or Justius. He was infamous for a medical checkup, the last before we could leave. And he detected a sty on my daughter's eye, 8 years old. And he said, if the sty is not removed within 1 week, we cannot go. That would have meant to start all over again. Could have taken another year or 2 years. So how do you get rid of a sty? I mean, it's a very innocent thing. We went to a doctor, and he said he only can treat it if he pulls all her eyelashes on that eye. And that was a torture. But the consul was very satisfied with it and didn't even say, I'm sorry. So it was a really terrible, but afterwards I heard that he was very unpleasant and not very friendly towards the Jews.
So you left Amsterdam in 1946, late 1946.
And we arrived here on January 1st, 1947. And as I told you, in the worst snowstorm until now in the history of New York City. We arrived here, and the whole family was at the pier. I didn't accept my sister-in-law, my husband's sister, and my aunt. I didn't know anyone of his family, no one. There were first cousins never seen before, never heard of. And we didn't have much luggage, so we came out pretty fast because we didn't find anything back, or very little. So we had our things to wear and some things I had made in Holland, a few dresses while I was there. And we had some sheets and pillowcases, which I got back, but I didn't have any furniture. I didn't have any beds, nothing. So we took and Stephen had always held my husband's attaché case with all the papers and with traveler checks and our visas and everything. Stephen took care of it, not even 9 years old. Only when we got into a cab, which someone hauled for us, and we had to go alone because then the cab was filled. No one was with us. And we were supposed to stay at my sister-in-law's apartment, not in her apartment, in an apartment she had rented for us, and we had paid for already since the last October, since October 1946. That were their good friends. So we paid 5 months for nothing, 4 months. So on Riverside Drive, close to the apartment where my sister-in-law lived, on 162nd Street in Washington Heights, The cab driver stopped and said he cannot make it through the snow. So he took everything out of the cab, put it all in the snow, and there we were standing, the four of us, not even knowing where to go, with our luggage, with two children who hardly could walk through the snow, towards 162nd Street. We had asked some children who were throwing snowballs, and the cab left too. And after the cab had left, my husband realized that he had left the attaché case in the cab. Not Stephen, because when we got into the cab, he said, "Stephen, now you give it to me and I will take care of it." With all our papers. Here we were standing at night, in darkness, in snow, without a visa, without anything, and traveler checks, and $3,000 in cash, which we took for a friend. Gone.
What did you do?
So we made it to my sister-in-law's apartment, and the whole Mishpoche was there, not only the ones who were at the pier. Endless Mishpoche of my husband's, and we were so tired, and we didn't want to talk about all the papers. And everyone told us, every single one of them, how lucky we were that we came at that time, because when they came here, there were no jobs and no apartments, and we were very lucky. And my husband, that I have to tell you, he told them that's the reason we went to Bergen-Belsen. We heard it was so bad in America, and we thought Bergen-Belsen would be much better. So this was our welcome in America.
Did you ever get the briefcase back?
We never got anything back, and no one could do anything with them except the money and the traveler checks, because the traveler checks were not signed. Yeah, they could have done them. American Express credited us for the traveler checks and said, if they will be cashed within the next 20 years, we have to give the money back, but they never were cashed. Our friend, we never told that we lost his money, but we replaced it over a couple of years. He never knows until now, if he's still alive, that we ever lost his money. And the only thing was we didn't have any identification, nothing. We had the Dutch consul contact Den Haag and Rotterdam, and eventually we got everything back, the papers. But it was a very, very sad beginning.
You told me you had some interesting jobs when you lived in New York.
Well, I started working already the next week after I arrived as a baby nurse, because my children never had seen a school from the inside. For the first time, they went to a school in Washington Heights, where my nephew went, who was 3 years older. And the first thing he asked me, how much do you pay me for taking the children? He's now 60 and we are good friends. But that was also entrepreneur. So I took a part-time job, and then the original baby nurse came back, and I took a job as a sales girl, and I hardly had started. The guy asked me, the owner, he asked me whether I couldn't stay longer than 3 o'clock and could come Saturdays. So I had to leave there. Then I got another sales girl job in a children's wear store, and the same thing happened. He wanted me to come Saturdays and holidays. I mean, I didn't work not on Saturdays because of religion. My children were home. And then I worked for a patent attorney as his German secretary. And then I got a nice offer only for the summer. This I got through a friend who had worked in this diamond business since the 40s. For the summer when his secretary was off, was a diamond importer, all Dutch people. And from there I got a call from the Diamond Trade Association, which was a membership organization. They were looking for someone to become a diamond weigher. I didn't even know what it was. They always had men and never tried a woman. And the man they had now wanted to retire, and they are looking for a diamond, but I have to be trained and I have to come for an interview. So I went for an interview, and the treasurer, there was no boss, a board of directors. The treasurer interviewed me and asked me how my legs are. I said, never ever anyone complained about my legs. But he wanted to know because I have to stand a lot. So the man who had done this job before trained me. And I was told it is on 2 weeks probation for both sides. If I don't like it after 2 weeks or can't do it or don't have the nerves to do it, then I can go, and if they think a woman doesn't work out, then they was fine with me. So I trained for this, and then I found out that there were only 4 or 5 diamond weighers in the world. In Israel, in Antwerp, and in 2 in New York, and in South Africa. That was it. It was an exclusive job. And I didn't stay 2 weeks, I stayed 12 years. Later on I became executive secretary, and that was my last paid job I had. For my husband's work I wasn't paid.
And what kind of work did your husband do in this country?
He represented also fabric companies, big ones, J.P. Stevens, Concord, Martin. In fact, we hardly have come to America. The United Silks Mills, this Mr. Englander, who was CEO, came to America and asked whether my husband would like to represent them in New York, but he didn't want to represent a German company.
And how long did your family stay in New York?
My family?
Your family, how long did you all stay in New York?
I stayed 42 years in the same house. My husband died in 1981, and I stayed in the house until 1990, when I came to Chevy Chase.
Can you tell me how you found out what happened to your parents in Germany?
My father died of a heart attack. He never really recovered from this beating, not from the pain or this physical humiliation, but he never could understand that one human being would do this to someone else. So he died, he was 58, of a heart attack. And my mother tried to, at that time you could still send telegrams, send a telegram. The German didn't let it go through, so I found out 2 weeks later, through a condolence letter from my girlfriend in Holland, that my father had died. And later on, much later, I saw a letter from my aunt who wrote that my mother was always looking out of the window, that her only child couldn't come to her father's funeral. And then the Germans had packed our house with, I think, 19 or 20 people. Everything happened at Bismarckstraße 3. But then in 1941, the end of 41, my mother the whole city was deported, except the ones who had left, to Riga. And from Riga, she was taken to Stuttgart and survived until 1945, when she died 4 weeks before the liberation. I never heard from my mother again, but my husband knew people in Buffalo who were together with her. And they told us that she always showed the pictures of her grandchildren. My parents saw my grandchildren the last time on this picture, when my children, the first and the last time ever, when my children were 6 months old. They got a permit from Germany, an 8-hour permit with travel time, to visit the children. Gentile friends took care of that. And it's also the last time I saw my parents. I was 24. And this is something which really hit me this time more than our story. Because our story, I talk about it almost every day, or you read something, or you meet someone, but you don't think every day what happened 50 years ago to your parents. My children didn't even know what a grandmother was when they came here.
Do you consider yourself today to be religious?
To be what?
To be religious.
No.
And did you ever give up hope at any time that you were in the camps?
I don't want to. I don't want to.
Tell me about your grandchildren.
My grandchildren, Marion has 2 children. Mark is an investment banker. He will be 32. John is in the media business. He would like to make films like this, documentaries. He's not, he has partners. He lives in New York. Stephen's oldest will be 31 in 2 weeks. He is in business with my son. My son took his son into business 4 years ago.
And what is his name?
And it worked out till now very well.
And what is his name? What is Stephen's oldest child's name?
Oldest child? Michael.
Okay.
And Danny works for such an international resource company, which also has to do with merchandise, with promoting merchandise. This is a big international firm. He lives in New Jersey. David is graduating Wharton this year, no, 1997, this term. And the youngest girl, Suzanne, is graduating high school next June and will most probably go to Haverford.
Have you been back to Recklinghausen?
I don't know whether I went back to Recklinghausen after many times returning to Holland and going on trips in Europe. I never went, but twice my friends in Holland almost forced me to go to the Jewish cemetery, because my father was the only person until maybe 10 years ago where I knew he was buried. I still don't have 5 people I know where they are buried.
Tell me about an event that you attended in 1995, which was the 50th reunion of the train that you took out of Bergen-Belsen.
About 6 months, maybe 9 months before we went on this odyssey. I got a letter from Israel where a committee had built all of all people who were on this lost transport. And the name of the committee is also the Lost Transport. And it was, they were stationed and they organized in Israel. And I first didn't want to go, but I wanted, Stephen had already decided to go, and Marion kind of decided. So they were going anyhow, whether I thought it would be too strenuous for me to go through all this again. They wanted to get together in Amsterdam and visit all the places, Westerbork, Bergen-Belsen, and especially people who were on the train, because this was a limited group. Most people still don't know about the train. It's nowhere shown. And one morning I woke up and I said, I cannot do this. I have to take my grandchildren. I just have to show them. So I invited all my grandchildren to this trip. And they all came except David, who just had finals at that time in college. And it was a wonderful experience. It was unbelievable. I mean, the camps, you only can say that's the way they looked, because they are all like big parks now. Bergen-Belsen was burned down by the British because of the typhus. By the way, Bergen-Belsen was liberated the day after we left. Westerbork, all these camps are erased. There are a lot of monuments in Bergen-Belsen, and there were a lot of praying and preaching and crying. And we had 4 buses. One was the American bus. I mean, it just happens. It's the people who spoke English. One was an Israeli bus. One was a Dutch bus. And 4 buses, 1, 2, 3. One more was a mixture, because there were about 190 people who went with us. 87 of them were survivors, and all the others were 2nd and 3rd generation. I was the oldest, and my granddaughter was the youngest. I was very excited on this bus, which no one could share with me, because I was the only one who was educated in Germany, and we